Hi guys, so I get asked quite a bit about some training advice, especially from people who aren't maybe able to get to a club because there isn't one near them, or they don't have time or whatever, or they just want to start their own club and start training in their own time. So over the coming months I suppose I'll give some basic solo training advice because it's fairly easy stuff to do via this medium, via video, but not very easy to do written down. It's easy to explain in this medium. So taking the one-handed sword, I'm taking a sabre for now. This is a Royal Artillery 3-bar sabre. One of the nice things incidentally about solo training is that you can use antique swords or sharp swords. Obviously be very careful if you're doing so. Make sure you've got high ceilings. Luckily I've got fairly high ceilings in here. If you ever see me looking up here, it's because there's a light fitting above me, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't hit the light. But you know, if you can go outside somewhere safe where you won't attract the police or something else, then clearly you'll probably have better headroom. If you don't have a sword or you don't have enough space to train indoors, then you can use something else that's weighted to do the movements. You don't have to use something that's full length. So, you know, a thick piece of wood that's comfortable to hold, or even, you know, perhaps a tool of some kind, a short axe, a short hammer, something like that. Something to get you started and get the motions. So, one of the things I find when people start in my classes with one-handed sword, doesn't matter whether we're doing 19th century one-handed sword, sabre, or whether we're doing medieval one-handed sword, is that most people their bodies aren't used to doing the sort of movements that you do a lot in swordsmanship, and so you have to get the muscles sort of used to doing those sort of movements. And the first thing is that, generally speaking, most people today, even if they go to the gym a lot or do other sports, tend to have not very strong forearms. And actually the idea, the sort of the Conan build, or the sort of kind of, you know, typical kind of gym bunny build is not actually necessarily the kind of build that you would end up with if you did loads and loads and loads of swordsmanship. If you look at classical statues, Greek and Roman statues and so on, you'll notice they've usually got really big calves, really big forearms, and pretty big shoulders, but they don't have really big biceps, triceps. They usually have very small pecs actually, but they've usually got quite strong backs and so on, and abs and such like. Which I definitely don't, I should hasten to add. However, forearms are something that require quite a lot of conditioning, I think, when people start training with one-handed swords. So a very simple thing you can do, and as I said before, you can use a shorter item than an actual sword if you need to, because you don't have space, is very simply get yourself in a comfortable standing position with your right foot forward, with your right toe pointing at something. Focus at something. Obviously I'm looking at the camera and the camera is my target here, but you can put something on the wall, or you can use you know, a picture or a light fitting or a television or something in front of you to focus on. And I do think it's important you do that because it gives you better posture and better focus, and also checks that you're striking in the right place. And very simply, lift your arm up and you just start moving the sword backwards and forwards from the wrist. Okay? So your arm is stretched out, your deltoids are working because you're having to sustain the weight of the sword up and the weight of your own arm as well. And then you're powering the cut with your forearm. Now, a couple of things to look out for with this. It doesn't really matter the angle of the cut necessarily, although I'll talk about that in a second. But try and make sure you're leading with the edge. When I say leading with the edge, that means hitting with the edge, and you're not twisting the blade as you strike, because clearly if you want to cut something or wound an opponent, you have to use the edge. Hitting them with the flat is just, it might hurt them slightly, but it's not going to wound them. And essentially spend a lot of time waggling the sword. I'll just stand sideways. I'm a bit restricted for space there, so I can't do this fully, but you're essentially waggling the sword at the wrist, and in doing that you're exercising the top of your forearm, both the top and the underneath in fact. So you're throwing the weapon out, pulling with the muscle on the underneath of your forearm, and you're pulling it back, reloading the weapon with the top of the forearm. And do this as much as possible and as often as possible. it advantages you in every aspect of swordsmanship, regardless of one-handed swordsmanship, regardless of what type of one-handed sword you're using, or what style you follow, or what period you follow, or whatever. Every one-handed sword is dependent upon the muscles on around your forearm, being able to cut with power and quickly, and then bring the weapon back again quickly. And what I commonly find with beginners is they're quite good at throwing the weapon out, but very slow at getting it back again. And of course, once you've thrown the weapon out, you can't defend very quickly or cut somewhere else very quickly if you don't have the strength in your forearm to be able to pull that weapon back again. Okay? So, first things first, get into this position with your right foot forward, and lots of the time focusing on a target, waggling the sword backwards and forwards, and you can do it softly and slowly, maybe as you get your energy back, and then go harder and faster again as you have got a bit more energy until your forearm starts to get tired, and then just keep doing it. And it's a form of weight training, but it's specific to swordsmanship, and it's something that's very useful for any style of one-handed sword. Clearly you can do this holding it with the thumb up in the saber grip, or you can do it holding it in the hammer grip, as you would do with a medieval sword, or you could do it with the fingering grip as well. You can do the same exercise, gripped however you like, and any type of one-handed sword. Once you start to get bored with that, or really good at it, then you change the angles. And clearly the downwards cuts are the most common, so this would be a number 1 for me and a number 2. There is a number 7 in the middle as well, but I tend to avoid that. So 1 and 2, just start going from left to right, trying to cut as much as possible just from the wrist. Okay? And then once you get good at doing the 1 and the 2, then you start to put in the 3 and the 4, and they're more tricky. They come upwards, up from one side, up from the other side. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And they're more tricky because it's harder to do it just from the wrist with those, but I'm going to talk about them in a future video. But for first things first, and I still do this as a regular exercise, and everybody I know, whether they realise it or not, who is a good swords person with one-handed swords, a lot of the time when they're at home walking around with a sword, they're doing this. And you can be on the phone wiggling a sword, you can be watching the television, sitting down on your couch waggling a sword, you can do lots of things. Be careful who's around, obviously check your wife isn't in the room, or little children or dogs or cats or whatever, so make sure it's a safe environment. And as I say, you don't have to use a sword, but this is one of the most useful exercises for getting your arms into the right physical state to be able to do one-handed swordsmanship. Thank you.